Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of On Point with Nupur Sharma. I'm joined. Our guest today is Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, and for this special podcast, I'm also joined by my colleague Rahul Roushan. I would like to first congratulate Mr. Chandrasekhar on his Rajya Sabha victory from Karnataka and his official entry into BJP, finally, after being an independent for so long. Hello, sir, welcome.
Thank you.
And congratulations on the Rajya Sabha seat.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for the warm welcome into the BJP family.
So, sir, I think we can just get right to it. Your entry into BJP has been at a time when many are thinking that there are certain things which are not going so great for the party. So, Rahul Gandhi is being projected by the media in a new avatar, and some recent events have also led to some amount of public anger, about which the PM also spoke yesterday. So, if we were to begin with this subject itself, would you say that the government or the party could have perhaps handled the Kathua and the Unnao cases better?
No, look, I think let's just start by making it quite clear that the crime in Kathua, like any crime against any child, is probably the most horrific and most despicable of crimes that you can have. India is a large country and crimes happen every day, but this kind of crime is the worst, and it is unconscionable and is indefensible. Now, my own view on this is that given the fact that these crimes have to be seen as what they are, which is the worst type of crimes, I would think that uh, whether you're a political party or you're a government or you're a bureaucrat or you're in the opposition, the instinctive reaction should be one of disgust, anger, and let's focus on swiftly arresting those who have committed this crime and prosecuting them so that they never do it again. That should be the response.
Right.
And that should be the response with, in my opinion, in the first 5 seconds of the crime being reported, not 3 months on, not when it becomes something of political opportunity, not when people are putting you on the defensive, whatever. So
Right.
to answer your question, regardless of whether you're on the government or you're the BJP or you're a political opponent of the BJP, I think everyone has almost a moral obligation and duty to respond to this kind of a crime with great anger and a call to action rather than this tutu meme that we constantly get into after crimes and where the victim is forgotten and then political point scoring seems to become the priority.
Right. But sir, it morphed into pretty much that as it went along because this crime happened in January. And in fact, in February, Opindia had also reported how there were families leaving that particular village. Hindu families were leaving that particular village because they alleged that they were being harassed by the Jammu and Kashmir Police Crime Division. So they had started leaving, and we had reported that back in February. So all through Jan, all through February, and now March, nobody has really reacted to this crime which happened way back then. And all of a sudden, it sort of gained momentum when there were calls being made for a CBI inquiry. So when the calls were being made for a CBI inquiry, the opposition parties started saying that the rapists were being defended and the rapists were being shielded. So, do you think that a call for a CBI inquiry in this situation is, tantamounts to protecting the rapist in that area?
Look, I am actually much more circumspect when people jump around and start alleging police favoritism or lack of confidence in the local police, and then or conversely, a call to the CBI being seen as something more partisan. I think what is required, if we were to look at it from the victim's family's perspective, and that is really the most important perspective in these kind of crimes, it is that there is a quick, swift, credible investigation into the crime which results in a very quickly rounding up whoever has committed the crime, and then go to the next phase, which is prosecuting them and sending them to the most significant possible punishment under the law. So I think what my own take on this, Nupur,
Yeah.
is very different. My experience from 2014, when I started actively advocating for waking up to this phenomenon of a rise in crimes against children, was
Right.
that the political class in our system, it tends to be apathetic towards this, or tends to want to brush it aside and move on to something else. And I think that is partly why almost always, this becomes an issue of whether the criminal is being shielded or not shielded, and therefore can the local police do its job, and should it be the CBI? In my opinion, that actually the conversation of whether it should be CBI or local police is giving an opportunity for, in many cases, the local police to basically wash its hands off the issue and say, let somebody else take it. Whereas, let's be clear, the best people to investigate these kind of crimes, assuming there is no partisanship and no attempt to shield the criminals, is the local police. Because they
Right.
understand what's going on, they understand the circumstantial nature of the evidence, who to collect it from and where to collect it from. Now, you have to but juxtapose this in the context of whether the police is really interested in doing justice for the victim, or are they doing a cover up. And that on that I don't have a view, because I tend to see the JNK police as a very brave force that is battling other many significant challenges despite heavy odds. So I don't know particularly about the case, this particular case, who was the IO and what the conduct of the IO was.
Mr.
All right.
Chandrasekhar, Rahul here.
Yeah.
As I understand that, perhaps everyone is seeing this Kathua crime, which is obviously the most heinous crime, as you have rightly said, in their own perspective. For someone, it's Kashmir versus non-Kashmiri, perhaps a manifestation of how Kashmir has to be a different part, a different country, and to that extent, somebody is saying is a Hindu versus Muslim, and somebody seeing as local police versus the CBI and stuff like that. However, you appear to be seeing it is purely as a crime against children. Is that what, if I said it, is that your perspective? The way you want to see the crime, that you simply want to remove every of these interpretations or aspects, and just want to focus on that it was a heinous crime against child, and that's how it should be treated.
Yes, Rahul, and I'll tell you why. I think, first of all, uh, children are very different kind of victims from a normal adult, because they can't speak to the crime, and in this particular tragic case, the victim is no longer alive.
Right.
So even when the victim is alive, I can assure you that child victims are not like adult victims, and therefore these crimes have to be seen really as crimes against children without coloring it with anything. If you color it with even the slightest amount of politics that, like Mr. Rahul Gandhi is trying to do, or his cohorts are trying to do, you end up doing one. You end up with one significant consequence, which is that justice will not be done. The
True.
debate will quickly move on from the criminal and the punishment for the criminal to something completely irrelevant to the victim. And like the victim's father said, the little girl was just old enough to not even know what was right and wrong. And we are having now groups of people in Delhi having these arguments and sort of characterizations of politics and ministers and police and all of that, and that we should never allow, because I'll give you another justification for that. Crimes against children today have the lowest conviction rate amongst crimes among any other crime in the country. And the reason for that is precisely this: because you have a victim who's a child, the evidence is almost always circumstantial. In this particular case, of course, it is not circumstantial. It's there is a murder involved, and if you don't get all of our sort of law enforcement resources focused on the crime and hunting down the criminal and punishing the criminals because they are almost often repeat offenders, you then move on to a topic that may give you some political brownie points for a few days or 48 hours, but then the core issue will disappear, which is the victim's family, the sorrow, the tragedy, the horror, and most importantly, these criminals who are going to run around, roam around, undeterred, and will often sort of do this thing again,
Right.
perpetrate the
So,
crime again.
Yeah.
So Rahul, just to summarize and just to say to answer your question, I believe that if you're serious and genuine about protecting our children, the discussion and debate only should be about the crime, the criminal, the prosecution of the criminal.
Right.
If there is a failure of the state, let's say not having enough child courts or not having enough police inspectors or not having enough trained police, then criticize the police, criticize the state and the government for that. But not get into this aimless sort of candlelight vigil, which is only aimed at. I mean, I would have liked that candlelight vigil in India Gate to be about when are we going to arrest these people and what is the punishment, what kind of amendments to the POCSO Act are required so that we never have this thing again.
Right. So you're saying that perhaps in all this politics, in all this ideological, upmanship that everyone has got into, the real issue is that that perhaps this unfortunate incident would have given us an opportunity to protect our children. That is getting lost. That's what you are saying.
And absolutely. And the Congress government during the UPA commissioned a study about child sexual abuse and found in their own study that almost a third or up to 40% of Indian children, through their study, by the way, were vulnerable to abuse and crimes against children. And they did nothing. They did nothing about it. The Karnataka government, for example, where I am involved actively in this issue, and many parents are involved with me in trying to get justice, has done precisely zero.
Right. So, sir, for example, picking up from where you left off, in February 2017, I believe, you had held a national level consultation where there were stakeholders from all areas. There were judges, lawyers, police officers, doctors, childcare professionals, etc., who were involved. And I believe that there was, the amendments to the POCSO Act, which would perhaps safeguard our children further, was discussed. And
Right.
there was a book of recommendations which was also presented to Ms. Maneka Gandhi. So could you tell us about what you think, what are the changes to the POCSO Acts that need to be done in order to safeguard our children?
So, Nupur, let me just tell you how this started. I started, a young couple approached me in February 2014, reasonably well-to-do couple, young professionals, and their child, who was all of 2.5, 3 years old, was in a pre-kindergarten school, had been molested in Bengaluru. And
Yes.
I will never forget that one call. And I did not know too much about the subject, and all I knew was that the parents needed some help in terms of having the police investigate this and help them investigate it. I remember calling the then Home Minister of Karnataka, who then went on to greater things in terms of becoming Steel Flyover Minister, etc., etc.
Right.
But he was those days a Home Minister. I called him up and I asked him, saying, "Look, there is this couple whose child has been, obviously the victim, and we need help." And his first reaction was, "Who asked the mother to go to work? Who asked the mother to work?
Oh, Lord.
Who asked them to admit this child to this school?" And it was then that I realized that whilst this phenomenon of children being at risk is widespread in our country, the governmental ecosystem that is supposed to protect the child and give him him or her safe environment to study and play in, was missing, or at best apathetic.
Right.
And it became clear to me that there was a need for both in the police as an institution, the courts as an institution, and schools to wake up to this, to create a safe environment for children, to arrest people and not dismiss, send off parents when they come to report crimes by the police, and to have courts that can swiftly prosecute these crimes. And when I wrote and repeated and reminded the Karnataka government several times, and I found that they were doing precisely, nothing, I took the initiative of calling all of the stakeholders in the National Law School here in Bengaluru, and there were judges, there were police professionals, there were prosecutors, there were lawyers, and there were parents, there were headmasters, just to create a group of people who can sit down and say, what can we do to protect our children? What can we do more? Share ideas, share best practices. And out of that came a set of recommendations that talked about many things, including strengthening the POXO Act, which, by the way, Ms. Maneka Gandhi yesterday has said that she wants to amend the POXO Act and create the death
Right.
penalty. So there were a series of recommendations in a reasonably high quality document that was then presented to her. So I think, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that the Karnataka government had to create more child courts, create more public prosecutors to prosecute child crimes, and create more capacity in the police to be able to handle, investigate, and build cases on child crimes, which are a very different type of, you need different type of policing.
Right. So,
But since nothing happened, we had one more of that consultation later last year, just to make another report, hopefully to get the attention of the chief minister, obviously is the only thing I failed in.
right. So, other than that, other than the POXCO Act, I know for a fact that you're very vested in this other idea about having a sex offenders registry, which
Correct.
for me personally is also an extremely personal subject, because I'm the mother of a daughter, and I feel that if I'm hiring somebody, or if I need to, I need to ensure that my child is not in the vicinity of somebody who has the potential to hurt her, or who has hurt other children in the past.
Correct.
But then this argument sort of gets a lot of resistance from the human rights activists, etc., saying that you will end up persecuting the people you put on the sex offenders registry, and they will not get the chance to sort of rebuild their lives, etc. So I am
Yeah.
extremely divided. As a mother, I think that the sex offenders registry is absolutely imperative, so that we can protect our children better. We have the power to keep our children away from offenders. Whereas there's this other side of the argument, which might be slightly convoluted, but there is this other side of the argument. So, sir, could you please tell us what the sex offenders registry would really do?
No, so I don't see any confusion in my mind at all about this, and I'll explain to you
Right.
why. The Child Sexual Offenders Registry is essentially a public domain document that will allow people to know who has been convicted of a crime against a child or children. Now,
Right.
uh, it implies that the person is convicted of a crime, and therefore he or she is on that registry. Now, please remember one thing: for every human rights person who says that the person who's convicted of a crime against a child is due his or her privacy, or is due a shot at rehabilitation, is unjustified, primarily because the primary responsibility of a society, if you have to choose between the two, is to maintain safety for children. And
Right.
all the child sexual offenders registry will do is to say this particular person cannot come in close contact, in proximity, or take up any job that puts him or her in proximity to a child. It does not prevent that person from rehabilitating himself or herself in doing some work, whatever, working in a restaurant, working in a chartered accountant. But people will know he's a convict because he's in the system, he's been convicted. So the Child Sexual Offenders Registry is a proven concept. It has worked elsewhere in the world, and it has to be operationalized in India. Now, here is the problem with the way it has been implemented in Karnataka. So, the only suggestion of mine that the Honorable Chief Minister of Karnataka, the Venerable Respected Siddaramaiah, has implemented is an announcement of the Child Sexual Offenders Registry. Now, how many entries does that registry have? Zero. Does that mean that there are no child sexual offenders in Karnataka? Obviously not. And the reason for that is the poor prosecution track record and therefore the low conviction rates of those who are being tried under POCSO for crimes against children.
Right.
So when you have either poor prosecution or poor policing or investigation, or you have unfriendly child courts where parents just decide the torture of taking a child to the court for the 3 years in a running is not worth it, and they withdraw, you have a situation where these offenders are never prosecuted and they will continue to offend again.
Right.
So the Child Sexual Offenders Registry is a great idea, but unless it is backed up by serious policing, investigation capacity, and better child courts, and therefore effective conviction of those charged with it, the Offenders Registry will remain with no entries. And if it's a register with no entries,
Right.
it does not play its part.
So another question related to this. So, for example, Turkey has suggested the increase of jail time for such crimes to 40 years, and I think it follows the jail term with chemical castration of the convicted felons who have abused children.
Right.
So I know that all of us, when we get emotional and such things happen, we say that the perpetrator should be chemically castrated, etc.
Right.
But do you see merit in this being a state law? Do you see merit in this being a law in the country where offenders of such heinous crimes, who perpetrate such heinous crimes, can be chemically castrated? Since there is always already one country which has recommended such a law.
So here is the thing, Nupur. I don't want to start a conversation in the heat of the moment, or when
Right.
we are emotionally charged about the criminal penal code, and whether we should add chemical castration as part of the punishment that we have in the penal code. In our criminal justice system, we only provide two ways of punishing criminals. One is, in the rarest of rare instances, the death penalty, and the other one is imprisonment of different terms. So in our statute book, in our law book, there is no provision today to bring in chemical castration as a form of punishing a crime. Now, I'm open to a debate on it, but I personally don't believe there is a need for things like that. I think we should look at, within our penal system, within our law, we should make it much more. This category of crime should go into a category of very, very grave crimes. So death penalty should be on the table at much lower thresholds than we would use for, let us say, crimes against adults, crimes against women, crimes against men. So I would bring the threshold of punishment, threshold down for crimes against children, where the death penalty is more easily available as a deterrent or as a punishment for those who commit these crimes. And I'll explain the logic to you why.
Right.
Because when a crime like this is committed against a child, it is almost akin to a murder, but because you are in a sense snuffing out a child's what do you say, you're taking a young innocent
Right.
child and you are effectively destroying his or her childhood. You are
Right.
creating a trauma that is almost akin to murder. I mean, it is like killing somebody. You're killing that child's soul by a breach of trust that is so horrific, that in my opinion the death penalty is the way to go. I don't think chemical castration, or we should do anything like that. We should say longer periods of imprisonment without parole and or death penalty. We have to make crimes against children very, very, very exceptionally painful for those who commit crimes against children.
So, but then we'd also have to get minor offenders into the gambit because, for example, when the Delhi rape happened, when the Delhi
Yes.
case happened,
Right.
the minor walked, and in fact, the minor was given a sewing machine and money to restart his life, etc. When he was the most brutal of the lot,
Yes.
and he walks among us now because he
Correct.
was a minor. He was a few months away from turning 18.
And I
So
think this
how?
no,
Yeah.
so I think this is a debate that is why I have been from 2014 stressing that we need to relook at the POXO Act. We really need to look at the Juvenile Justice Act. We have to harmonize these. We have 3, 4 different laws. One that deals with child trafficking, then there's juvenile justice, and then there is POXO. We
Right.
have to look at harmonizing all of this to create a overall architecture, an overall coherent harmonized framework of laws that makes it absolutely painful for people who even think about committing crimes against children. So, and there, in my opinion, and this is worth having a debate. I don't have a particular point of view today, excepting to say that everybody should be punished. But when there is a juvenile and the juvenile is inflicting crimes on a child, how do we deal with that juvenile is something that we must debate and discuss. I don't think we should give them a free pass just because he's a juvenile. But should
Right.
he be automatically treated as an adult? Maybe there's a conversation and a debate that we need to have about that.
So we are having this debate thanks to Mr. Chandrasekhar, about child laws, child safety, juvenile, and all that. Similar debates happened after the unfortunate Delhi rape incident, and we had some, incidents like our rape laws were amended, stalking and those things were brought in. Now the truth is that in this country, debates and any consequent steps, these are driven by a particular set of people, the activists, the media. Now these guys in current situations, especially related to Kathua, they are completely besotted with something else. They are not talking about issues that you are talking. So how
Right.
much you are confident that that this can be turned into the into focus, into debate, and just like we had stringent laws, or rather stringent modification in the rape laws or stalking and all that, which followed after 2012 incident. Something of that sort that we as a society learn, and something of that sort happen now. How do you? I mean, are you confident that something of this will happen? Because people who usually take up these things are completely in different phase right now.
No, so Rahul, I can't read people's minds, but I can only say that when the Prime Minister says that the daughters of India will get justice,
Right.
and I am hoping that his advisors and his bureaucrats will advise him that the laws currently are not strong enough. They are in some places vague, and that we need to change, improve these laws. That the government of India will and the Parliament will respond and will do the needful in terms of legislation.
Right.
But remember one thing, that is just one part of it.
True.
Even after Nirbhaya, we have enacted the law, we have stronger laws, and you can see a lot of it depends on the state government's commitment
Absolutely.
to their state being safe havens for children, their states being safe haven for women. You see in Bengaluru every New Year and every a few days you hear about a woman or women being stalked, hounded, and being subject to all kinds of crimes. This is despite the Nirbhaya Act. This is despite the crores of money
True.
available under the Nirbhaya Fund. So let us be clear that the central government and the Parliament of India, I am pretty sure, will respond because they will respond, and I can see that they are responding. But a lot of this has to do with the fact that state governments and the discourse and debate at the state levels are not as, let's say, sustainable or lasting and behind this issue. and that is the only way you can explain. For example, the reason I keep using Karnataka as an example is because this is my home and this is where I live.
True.
Is that despite every 3 to 6 months a crime against a child being reported, being covered in the media, being talked about, parents coming out and doing public marches and protests against the schools, you see very little action on the ground in terms of reforming how either schools are made safer or policing is made more effective or prosecution is faster by the state government. So I think it is really about the people of the state, for example, here in my state, saying, look, we want to have a discussion about how do we keep the state safer or my city safer for my children. And this will have to be a slightly more sustained conversation with the political leadership. And maybe in May, when there's a new government,
Right.
that discussion can happen. But it is less to do with Delhi and Parliament and central government, and more to do with the political imperatives or the political commitment of the state governments to their children.
But so there's another point. So we spoke about the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act 2015, for example. So I have noticed this trend that what Congress does is basically on the face of it, they will fight for such issues, but then they go behind the curtains and use the judiciary to sort of subvert some of these acts which are passed by the parliament. So Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act, for example, there is a congressman called Tehseen Poonawala, and he moved a petition in the court to say that this act should not be implemented, and that retributive punishment would be bad for the juveniles who were involved. And his advocate was Salman Khurshid. So what the point I'm trying to make is that Congress seems to have this habit of supporting women's safety, supporting child safety, etc., on the face of it, and then they go behind the curtains and use the judiciary often to subvert some of these legislations which can protect women and children. So,
Yeah.
how does the political class really handle this sort of a situation where politicking is, the narrative of the day, but what happens behind the curtains is not really in the public eyes as much?
No, look, I don't see. I mean, I have consistently maintained for many months and years that the Congress does not have any clear position on anything. They basically lurch from political opportunity to political opportunity. There's no underlying uh, belief system for them. When they see something and they see there is a way of rabble rousing it, whether they believe in it or not, is it something that they have researched, understand or not, they will jump on that bandwagon. They are a party today that is basically going from one bandwagon to the other bandwagon without even making any attempt to manage the contradictions between one bandwagon and the other bandwagon. I have said
Right.
this before and I'm saying it again. Now, the problem, of course, is that a lot of the people don't follow this thread of their contradictions. Most people don't connect their position today on Asifa to their lack of conduct or response on all the crimes that have happened in Karnataka under their government. So nobody makes that connection, and therefore they are given almost a free pass to do this little candlelight march in India Gate with nobody challenging them, saying, "Look, excuse me, but why did you not do any candlelight marches in Bengaluru when there were children they were assaulted there as well?" So I mean, I am not outraged or upset or angry or this thing. I'm actually bemused by the fact that we are allowing them to almost like a carte blanche to do this drama to drama, tragedy, photoshopping or tragedy opportunity, jumping from one to another, without holding them accountable for what they have done all these years or not done all these years.
Right. Now,
Right.
people who would ask, such questions to Congress about, reminding them about the earlier, contradictory stands, then these people are accused of indulging in whataboutery. So that's the problem. And people who are supposed to ask
But
them are not asking. I mean,
but Rahul,
yeah,
no, Rahul, this is not whataboutery.
right,
Whataboutery is if you do something wrong and I say, but But you say, no, but what about the other guy also who did something wrong?
Right.
That is whataboutery.
Yeah.
This is not whataboutery. This is saying, Mr. Rahul Gandhi or Mr. XYZ of the Congress, when you start getting on a soapbox and patronizingly preaching about child safety, can you also please tell us about your track record in the same?
True.
I mean, you didn't just tupco out of the solar system yesterday. You've been in the political system for the last 10, 12 years, as I understand. Can we please understand your performance and track record on safety of children?
True.
What has your government done? What have your various governments done in state government? So this is not whataboutery. This is basically calling a person to account
True.
when he stands and starts accusing somebody else of, let's say, less than perfect governance. Then you say, okay, fine, let's just discuss what you have done. And
Right.
that has to be done, because this we are allowing people otherwise to get away scot-free and almost confirm what Sushil Shinde, the famous home minister of the UPS, said, that public memory is short.
True.
It is almost like you are asking people to believe that there has been a reboot in India where everything before Rahul Gandhi suddenly vanishes from public memory. Everything before Rahul Gandhi became president of the Congress, suddenly people have to forget. And that there is this brave new world where Rahul Gandhi is the critic and everybody else is going to be the criticized.
Yeah, and
I'm sorry, but that,
yeah. Apart from Sushil Shinde, actually, the other entity, not person, that comes to mind, and Nupur would definitely like to add to that. Given how Congress, especially Rahul Gandhi, has been behaving, is Cambridge Analytica. You just said that they jump from one bandwagon to another without seeing the contradiction.
Absolutely.
Now, the underlying thing is that they want to tell different groups of people stuff that their bias wants to listen to, and they do it to different groups of people, which is exactly what, say, Cambridge Analytica says that this company does. Now, in my personal...
Yes.
So I would add to this. I would add to this just a little bit because I just concluded an interview with Jamie Bartlett, and he gave me quite an insight into how Cambridge Analytica really works.
Yep.
So he said that there are two basic issues that there are two basic strategies that they focus on. So one is breaking down the entire target group into small universes. Each universe has one set of people that can be targeted with a particular sort of messaging. And second is that their aim is to always break down the population into smaller target groups. Now, maybe Cambridge Analytica would do this on a digital platform, but in my mind, it draws a parallel as to what Congress has been doing, trying to, create that divide in the society, playing to the fault lines. So they speak differently to Dalits, they speak differently to Lingayats, they speak differently to Marathas, they speak differently to the OBCs and the tribals. So in my mind, this is exactly the strategy that Congress has been employing. Absolutely. And it's exactly what Cambridge Analytica does. And now there is no doubt that Congress hired Cambridge Analytica. So do you see that same thing happening in Karnataka as far as the Lingayats are concerned?
No, look, if you remember, Nupur, sometime back, I think it was over 4 or 5 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, you asked me something and I said, be prepared in Karnataka for hit jobs that will make Gujarat seem like a walk in the park.
Yeah.
Lies and hit jobs. And beyond the Cambridge Analytica, strategy of dividing and subdividing, the biggest education that Cambridge Analytica has given to their very good student, Congress, and Congress must get a good report card on learning well from Cambridge Analytica, is that you create these narratives that essentially, and do it in a manner shrill and loud, so that in a sense overtakes the natural questions that are being posed of you or of your conduct of your past. So you walk into a room or whatever, a state, and immediately start flaying around these wild allegations and wild topics, which will take everybody by surprise. And then suddenly you are in the midst of that conversation and defending that or countering that, rather than the set of questions you are supposed to ask the Congress about itself.
Right.
That is the core political strategy here, which is Rahul Gandhi will come to Bangalore, and instead of being prepared to respond to the lakes and the garbage and the roads and the corruption, will suddenly start saying, Rafael, or your jobs are gone, or,
Yeah.
so suddenly everybody in the media and everybody goes off into that direction, abandoning the set of questions that you are supposed to pose to him.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is the core strategy, which is to distract and run, shoot and scoot, whatever you want to call it. But the point I'm making is that we have failed to link up the various contradictions in his various different statements to various blocks. Now, I'll give you an example. He says in Delhi, the Congress is all about communal harmony, and
Right.
we believe in the integrity and unity of India. This is his, by the way, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he said precisely this.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Karnataka, his government does this dividing of Lingayats.
Right.
And I don't know if you saw the front page article in a local newspaper, the Kannada Prabha, which says that there is a research that shows that the only communities that support the Lingayat decision, Lingayat as a separate religion decision, are the communities that support the Congress, which is the Muslims and the Kurubas.
Okay.
So there is data that shows that this is nothing but politically trying to divide the vote that is an anti-Congress vote.
Right.
Now, the question that you and I should ask is, but how does this divisive divide and rule strategy stack up with what this patronizing pontification in Delhi about we are a party that stands for unity, we are a party that stands for communal harmony? That
And the Jalayodhari party.
Yes,
Let's not forget.
Yeah, so let's not forget that. And then you have this pre-election temple run. So,
Yes.
so I think the problem is people have been a bit taken aback in the last 8-9 months about the new Congress strategy. It is now beginning to sink into people in the media, in the political class, that this is what they're trying to do. And I think now media and people like you, me, everybody will start asking the question, hey, excuse me, how does A square up with B, B square up with C, C square up with D? Because A, B, C, and D seem to be 4 completely contradictory positions that you are taking.
Right.
Right.
But
That has to happen. It has to happen.
yeah, but Rahul Gandhi, my namesake, is pretty much lucky in that sense that very few people question him. Obviously you are questioning, the party would be questioning, but he, as you rightly said, he gets a free pass from others. Even in Karnataka, where Congress is the defending party, I don't think that the civil society as such, what we say, or the national media, for example, is scrutinizing the state government that much. Somebody like Prakash Raj, who would say that he's neutral and all that, is completely gone. Taken an anti-BJP stand and all that. So in all this, how do you see? I mean, how does BJP plan to ask those questions, because nobody else is asking? And what is going to be the strategy of countering Rahul Gandhi or Congress strategy of not answering any questions, but actually coming up with more and more questions which are perhaps irrelevant to the local politics in Karnataka?
So I think, Rahul, so what you say is right. And I think my answer to that is that I completely agree and support the strategy that the Prime Minister uses or is using, which is when faced with a political, set of falsehoods, every individual has two real options in terms of response. One is you get into a tutu meme with the person who's flinging the allegation at you.
Right.
The other is to go to the people, the voter, the actual my bap, and let him or her, the voter, know the truth.
Okay.
Now, and I say this because I just came from out 2 days ago after a day-long fast, 8-hour fast, about this issue of the parliamentary disruption in Hubli Dharwad. I sat and fast in Hubli Dharwad, and I realized there that, and I was frankly, I was skeptical about the fast before I went into it. I was wondering, why are we doing this? Why is the Prime Minister asking us to do this? I asked myself that question. But after the 8 hours, I sat there and I met with all the people who were there, thousands of people, and the spontaneous messaging from the people, by the way, that said that Congress is jealous of this one person who has worked his way up to the top of the government. They are only now completely interested in undermining him and tripping him up by doing whatever they can do, by saying whatever they have to say. Their entire focus is somehow to undermine and trip this government and the leader of this government, the Prime Minister. Now, this is not something I said. This is spontaneous feedback after the fast.
Okay.
So I think, to answer your question, there will be, leading up to 2019, Rahul, there'll be all kinds of nonsense and noise.
Right.
I think Rahul Gandhi and his team have spent their money on Cambridge Analytica well. They have learnt all the dirty tricks in the book that Cambridge Analytica has had, and they will unveil more and more of this leading up to 2019.
Right.
The only thing the government must do, and the political leadership and the party and the cadre of the BJP must do, is constantly make the effort at communicating with the actual person, the Indian, the voter, the citizen, and make sure that he or she know what the direction of the country is, what is the reality, what is the lie, what is the hit job, what is the propaganda.
Right.
And that it will mean a lot more effective, a lot more communication, a lot more direct interaction with people, because at the end of the day, it must be the people of this country who are deciding, what is right and wrong and what is fake and
Right.
true.
So you said that Prime Minister in a way helped people to reconnect, common man through this fast as well. And you are saying that this is going to be the strategy of communicating to the people rather than answering Rahul Gandhi.
Yeah.
So do I understand, especially because Prime Minister also comes into the picture, that a blitzkrieg kind of a tour of Prime Minister is coming near Karnataka voting day, where he would be interacting with people, and he would be like all these questions, irrelevant questions or whatever that Congress has done, that would be answered, or maybe the communication would be taken up by Prime Minister himself, so far as Karnataka Assembly elections are concerned.
No, I don't. I think let me clarify.
Right.
What I'm saying is that at the end of the day, the government, the BJP, and the workers of the BJP, of which I am one, will communicate increasingly directly with the people, tell them what is it we are doing, what is our, as they say in Hindi, hamari niyat kya hai, what is our intention, what is our objectives. Of course, there will be mistakes that people will make. Governments will make mistakes. There will be, everything is not hunky-dory and 100% perfect. The whole environment is a constantly changing environment. But that communication and the relationship of trust between India and BJP, India and the BJP leadership, India and Narendra Modi, that will only strengthen from this day on. And that is the biggest way to fight this Goebbelian Cambridge Analytica meets Rahul Gandhi, meets whoever, meets fake Facebook accounts, meets Kazakh bots, whatever that strategy is. All of that combined can only be defeated by making sure that the trust that the BJP and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has with the common Indian continues to grow and trust and expand.
In fact, to this end, there was a very interesting article on Mind Makers, which is another right-leaning portal, and I must mention it. It was by a gentleman, an author called S. Sudhir Kumar, and he had written that we have had a good laugh and enough fun has been poked at Rahul Gandhi's, but it is now time that we question his incoherence and ignorance. And I think that also includes how we should start questioning the agenda. Yeah.
Yeah, not just incoherence and ignorance. It is also about his duplicity and his hypocrisy. I think, his attempts to make us believe that the Congress was born yesterday and does not have a history of 70 years of negligence and corruption and is somehow not accountable to the people of India for that. That we must burst that bubble and balloon very quickly.
Okay, but somebody, especially a Rahul Gandhi fan, could argue that earlier you were just rejecting Rahul Gandhi as a clown. Now you consider him important enough to counter. So is
Look,
that a kind of a like a step back in itself for the party?
no, no, I don't. I never considered him a clown. I mean, I can speak for myself. I never considered him a clown. I never describe political opponents in that way. I describe political opponents as being good for the country, or just terribly bad for the country. And I consider this gentleman and his whole ecosystem and his whole political strategy as being deeply dangerous, deeply divisive, and built on a house of cards of lies and fake everything. So I've never considered him a clown. And clown implies that you provide joy and happiness to young children. I mean, and I can assure you that that's not what comes to mind when I talk about Rahul Gandhi or when I think about Rahul Gandhi.
Right. So for the upcoming Karnataka elections, in national media, obviously we think that it's little bit getting ignored. Now, for our listeners, can you give a kind of what's happening over there, what you are getting the feeling like, and what are going to be the big issues? Because from Delhi or from Mumbai, it appears that I don't know. I mean, like, Congress hasn't even come up with their list of candidates. It appears a little lukewarm, even though it's so near to the next
Yeah.
Lok Sabha elections.
No, I think it's lukewarm because the tempo of the elections is just beginning to pick up. So I think it's the next 4 weeks that are going to be getting everybody's attention, coverage, media coverage is going to amp up. So all of that is going to happen. But the situation in Karnataka is simply like this. It is very, very akin to the 2014 national
Okay.
elections, where you had an incumbent Congress government who was spending thousands of crores of rupees on advertising, so-called achievements. And here too, the Siddaramaiah government has taken budgetary approvals and is using over 1,000 crores of taxpayer money to put his hoardings up and his, achievements, at least in his mind, upon hoardings and paper advertisements across the country, across the state. The real questioning of his performance, and remember, he has been 5 years chief
True.
minister, and this election is about his performance as a chief minister, his government's performance in the last 5 years, the corruption and the large number of people of his own government and his party that have been caught with undisclosed income post demonetization. There are many relevant questions that will be posed. Of course, it is given that they are trying essentially to make this about everything but
True.
their performance. So they have tried. They brought the flag in. They brought in Kannada Pride. They brought in Nava Karnataka Nirmana. They have brought in Rahul Gandhi's visit, talking about banking scams and every other issue that is accepting the most important issue that voters of Karnataka want to know, which is the performance of the last
Right.
5 years of the Siddaramaiah Rahul Gandhi government. And those questions will now start getting amped up and more visible and will cannot be ducked by
Right.
this duo in the
Right.
coming weeks.
They, in fact, made an
And there
issue
is
out of your nomination from Karnataka as well.
yeah. No, no, they've made an issue out of many things of me, but unfortunately, by them making an issue, I don't go away.
Right.
Mr. George said that he will take care of me, and Siddaramaiah obviously is not going to invite me for any festivals to his house, but that's okay, that's fine. My point is that the whether you're a voter in North Karnataka, Mumbai Karnataka, Central Karnataka, Coastal Karnataka, Bengaluru, Old Mysore, any of the districts of Karnataka, whether it's farmer distress, whether it is water shortage, whether it is corruption, whether it is dividing the Lingayat community and dividing people based on faith and religion. There are many questions that Siddaramaiah will have to answer, and every effort of his to duck that and make it about something else will be defeated. And that I can assure you, on behalf of the people of Karnataka, that he will not succeed. So it is the same strategy that Manmohan Singh and Sonia Gandhi used in 2014 with Bharat Nirman and huge advertisements that said that everything is hunky dory in India. But people finally still said, look, what about CWG scam? What about this brazen corruption in your government? It's all great to talk about vision and all of that, but we still want to know about your
But
conduct.
one difference, perhaps I would say, is that in 2000, in run-up to 2014, although Congress did try, but they couldn't spook someone, or a normal voter, that if Modi comes, this will happen or that will happen. Now that, I mean, wrong things, obviously. Now that is something that Congress in Karnataka and in fact all over the country is trying to do, is that, Muslims would be eliminated, Dalits would be eliminated. So they have found a strategy that we don't want to answer you, but we would create an environment of fear, which perhaps they failed to create in 2014. And there was largely a positive, messaging and positive, what you call, a wave attached with BJP and Prime Minister Modi. Now, how do you exactly counter that? One, of obviously, you said that you directly talk to the people. Any other thing? I mean, obviously, I do understand that strategies cannot be disclosed.
Rahul,
Yeah.
no, Rahul, 2014, let me assure you, because I was flipping through a few days ago my own papers and documents and interviews of 2014. In 2014, the Congress did attempt, no, and they did make an attempt about trying to create fear amongst minorities, about Prime Minister Modi's track record in Gujarat, etc., etc. They tried to create a wave or a buzz about him being a dictator. I remember giving an interview saying that that is the biggest nonsense. We are a democracy; nobody can become a dictator. That question was posed to me. So it is not very different from 14, except for one thing, that the social media presence for these elections are at a quantitatively level higher, much higher than
That's true.
2014. 2018, social media, digital platforms are creating a whipping up a frenzy against Prime
Yeah.
Minister Modi that was not there in 2014. So that is clearly something that needs to be factored into by the BJP's communication team, saying that, look, if there is all of these websites that are just flinging things at the Prime Minister and his government, and trying to create this really dubious narrative, scaring people or making people into negative about the BJP or the government, that is something that will have to be countered, because that is, by the way, very easy to create, especially when you have admissions on when you have proof that there are fake Facebook accounts being used,
Yeah.
Kazakh bots being used. All of that is all in the public domain. It's not difficult to create a shrill noise that tries to crowd out the legitimate questions of the voters of Karnataka about the performance of the last 5 years. But that is for the BJP to counter and say their own communication will make sure that the normal anti-incumbency questioning will not be drowned out by the shrill, by the group from Kazakhstan and combination with Cambridge Analytica.
So I think we've covered the Kathua incident, which we primarily wanted to cover in this podcast. And we've also covered the Karnataka elections. So all the best. And we hope you find victory and the party finds victory.
Thank you so much.